Hey, welcome to a compilation of every modding short I've made to date. Part 1 was secondaries, and this is part 2, melee weapons. Melee weapons in Warframe are unique in, well, obvious ways, but they also have a special mod slot for stances, unique mods that entirely change the melee attacks available to you, while also, probably more importantly, increasing the maximum mod capacity for your weapon. Stances are, in theory, an extra degree of customization for your weapon, with many weapons having 2, 3, or even 4 unique stances in the case of swords. Nowadays, however, new weapon types will have just one singular stance mod. Unlike in other games where melee combat's more of a focus, your average swing of a sword slash staff slash chainsaw in Warframe lacks in terms of weight and follow through. Swings are light and rapid, and the best weapons and stances tend to be the ones that let you move as freely as possible as you turn the very air around you into a blender. Hey, Epic Gamer Challenge, do 10 push-ups every time you hear me say melee influence in this section. You'll look like Crash Bandicoot by the end of the video. The Ripkas are weird. On top of being claws, a weapon type that has more stances than it does actual weapons, Ripkas are a melee weapon that is most commonly used for a passive buff. That buff, of course, being Amalgam Ripkas True Steel, a straight-up upgrade of the original mod that also gives a shotgun reload buff and 100% gore chance. This is important for exactly one frame, Necros, whose Desecrate gets another proc on split corpses, giving you something like 2 times 54% chance at extra loot per corpse. Because of this, Ripka builds aren't particularly because the weapon is good, but they try to make it the best it can be in spite of its stats. There are many builds out there, but here's mine. A general mix of crit combo scaling to work with arts and the Ripka's decent crit, and a viral heat condition overload because you are going to have to rip the condition overload from my cold dead hands! You know what they say, another week, another obscure off-meta weapon hidden in some off-the-beaten-path faction grind. The Slaytra is called Signature Machete, and the blueprint can be bought from his garrison at rank 2 standing. The Slaytra has a unique passive of doubling the duration of slash procs caused by the weapon. It also has the unique passive of being slow as hell, so maybe bring along some external way of boosting attack speed. Now, the Slaytra's passive kind of pigeonholes it into a purely slash-based build, so that means we're gonna want damage, crit, combo scaling, and buzzkill. You won't exactly be competing with Graham Prime users with this one, but the extended bleed duration can lead to some funny builds with Expedite Suffering. Nice. The Syam, the Nakana from Nepheri is cool. It's weird, but it's cool. It has a unique heavy attack where it flings out a fast-traveling long-range shockwave with some unique properties. Unfortunately, the shockwave suffers from what I like to call Desert Wind Syndrome, where it won't build your combo or proc Tenokai. Now, you could do your bog standard big meta crit slash build with this one, slap a Tenokai mod on there, and pretend you're not just using a worse Nakana Prime. Or, you could buck up, take the initiative, and buy yourself a copy of Corrupt Charge. Because as a heavy attack spam weapon, this thing rules, especially when firing down hallways, because these waves have infinite punch through. They also work well for applying abilities like Saren's Toxic Lash, and I'd imagine it would be good with Corufell too, but I don't have Corufell because I spent all my time in Nepheri farming freaking Syam. I really like the Quassus. I mean the Quassus. They're your bog standard war fans on the surface, but just like me, they harbor many layers of complexity underneath. Quassus' heavy attack launches a fan of 9 daggers, and the word of the day here is guaranteed slash proc, because these daggers have guaranteed slash procs, which means you're gonna want to build for them. So now the question just becomes, Tenokai or pure heavy attack spam? They both work pretty well, but I personally think I'm a bigger fan of Tenokai on this one. Firstly, because red crit slash procs make my brain produce the funny chemicals. And secondly, because the heavy attack isn't as prohibitive at close range as the Syam's is, so you're free to slice and dice while occasionally impaling several unlucky enemies across the room. Quassus is Zaku's signature weapon, and it allegedly has better homing when it's used by them, but I really don't see it. The Warframe that does synergize with Quassus, though, is Mirage. Just make sure to pick a subtle energy color so you don't get flashbanged. Bringing the Lesion to a mission these days is like showing the Persona 4 OST to a Persona 5 fan. It's objectively cool, but people are gonna call you a has-been. This thing used to be all the rage back in the day before DE ruined my life by nerfing Condition Overload. And it can still perform, just don't expect any Gram Prime level crits out of this. Lesion's a polearm whose distinguishing features are having high slash damage and status chance, coupled with a trait that adds toxin damage and attack speed when you get a status proc. This means that you physically cannot get a pure slash build out of this one. But if you only put on one element, like Cold, the Toxin buff with basically 100% uptime can give you viral at the cost of only one mod slot. In terms of stances, I recommend either Shimmering Blight or Bleeding Willow for the certified polearm experience of holding forward in melee and just watching the room around you turn into dust. Overall, I'd say this one's worth a spot in your arsenal due to its passive, but Lesion's not going to create a second melee meta shift. Not yet, anyways. The Gazal Machete, probably one of my favorite looking weapons in all of Warframe. Too bad it's the weaponry equivalent of an evolutionary dead end. This weapon's unique in how it boasts synergy with the Jin Sentinel, and you really had better use Jin, because otherwise this is one of the middest melee weapons in the game. Every time Jin casts Fatal Attraction, the Gazal gains 30 seconds of free corrosive damage, and every takedown with the machete buffs the next Fatal Attraction cast with a minuscule amount of stacking corrosive damage. This was a very weak synergy when the weapon released, and 8 years of the most insane power creep to ever creep didn't do it any favors. But like with any struggling pop musician, we can make up for a lack of quality with sheer quantity of status effects, that is. Rocking the classic Manifold Momentous Bond combo on your Sentinel will allow Fatal Attraction to pop more often and hit enemies with a slew of stats effects. And the free corrosive damage means that you can mod the Gazal for viral damage. And there you go, viability. Although the Nautilus can really do all this and better while letting you use a better melee. Overall, I couldn't think of a more fitting combo to the Jin. Both of these guys are power crept, desperately in need of a buff, and still somehow fun to mess around with. This thing is the platonic ideal of a meta melee weapon. The Dorrclave is Dagoth's messed up and evil whipblade that you can craft out of Vein Thorns from the Abyssal Zone. This thing has some wild stats. High status, high crit, and it literally does only slash damage. It also has a unique passive where after getting 10 kills, your next 10 attacks get an additive 100% status chance and increased follow through. A stat I think DE just made up right now that causes your attacks to fall off less than when hitting multiple enemies. Here's the build. As always, you can use faction mods if you only shower once a week, or plop in Buzzkill or Melee Elementalist for a more universal damage increase. Condition Overload is a weird mod to put on here because if you have literally anything else putting status effects out, it's the way to go. But otherwise, Dorrclave's single damage type makes Pressure Point the optimal choice. Overall, Dorrclave is a very potent and unique melee weapon with a lot of synergies to take advantage of. It also, being an actually viable whip blade, is icing on the cake. This is the Amanata, Komei's signature polearm. At base, this thing has really respectable stats, which is only improved on by its unique passive, where every 30 hits, a d6 is rolled to determine one of several buffs. This thing can also use Amanata Pressure, a variant of Pressure Point that gives a huge damage increase and causes heavy attacks above 8x combo to apply a random status effect. Bottom line, this weapon is really good. And there are probably several builds you could use in conjunction with the many buffs it gives itself. What I settled on was a melee influence build to benefit from 3 out of Amanata's 6 buffs having to do with status effects. Overall, I think this is my favorite thing to come out of the Komei update. It's a perfectly viable weapon on its own that's only made better by the random stat increases it can receive. So yeah, gambling wins, I guess. Crescent Rose, the Corufell, is Citrine's signature heavy scythe, a weapon type I actually had no idea existed before now. The description makes this thing sound way cooler than it actually is. While mode switching to a gunblade would be awesome, all this thing actually can do is a glacially slow unique heavy attack that fires a projectile with, as far as I can tell, infinite punch through. A heavy attack build for this thing works pretty well, but it's at that point I'd question why you're using a gun-scythe instead of just a gun. I ended up settling on a Tenokai build as a way to max out both aspects of this weapon. To be honest, after both the Syam and the Quassus, the luster of normal weapon but the heavy attack as a projectile is fading for me. But I think this thing is still plenty good in its own right. Sorry, don't know what came over me there. Nepheri are Archon of Mars dual daggers. If you have no idea who that is, don't worry about it. Nepheri overrides your melee stance's neutral combo with a 2-hit chain that ends with your Warframe literally breathing fire. Although my first hope was that maybe these fireballs were piercing or maybe exploded in an area. Nah, it's just 4 really fast projectiles that are admittedly really good for spreading status procs. Funnily enough, I'd say the strongest part of the combo is the hit right before the fireballs, actually, where you get 2 slashes with 4 guaranteed status procs. So if you're hoping for a playstyle of exclusively belching flames in place of your melee combos, you're gonna be sorely disappointed. Sorry for getting your hopes up, Chroma players. Other than that, these really are just a set of dual daggers with innate heat damage. I suppose you're encouraged to use them alongside Archon Amar's mod set, but like, these mods are all legitimately terrible, and all they really combine to give you is a slightly better Rift Strike. Shout out Twin Basolk. Overall, I'd say Nepheri is decent. It's got a very high damage, albeit very immobile, unique combo, and an innate damage type, but it's also hidden super deep into the game, in the same off-the-beaten-path grind Caliban was left to rot in, so it's really up to you to decide whether decent is good enough to go out and get it or not. The Twin Basolk are a pair of Grineer heat axes that require both a Twin Zorn and a freaking Atomos to craft, which is a pretty big ask. And surprisingly, for a weapon released almost 10 years ago, they're actually worth the cost. Basolk's most notable characteristics are its non-existent crit chance, which is fortunately balanced out by its innate heat damage, as well as a crazy base 40% status chance. Rift Strike is also a unique mod for this weapon that lets you instantly teleport up to 25 feet with a heavy attack when aiming at an enemy. My first thought was to make a heavy attack build to take advantage of this, but without decent crit, the heavy attacks really don't hit like they should. However, a Tenokai build, focusing on viral heat damage along with conditions perfection, is incredibly powerful, so long as you have the gamer reflexes to line up your Rift Strikes in the 2-second window given to you for Tenokai. I'm genuinely surprised at how good this weapon is. Not only do its stats make it incredible, it can easily slot a unique mod that gives it its own distinct and fun playstyle, which, again, for a 10-year-old weapon, is a dang feat. Dr. Friday, you've done it again. The Ruvox are a pair of Entrati Tech gauntlets. In typical Entrati fashion, they also channel the power of the void and gold coins, for some reason. When you reach the combo threshold, heavy attacking will transform this weapon into its Incarnon form, sacrificing attack speed for range and the ability to impale enemies on void spikes with heavy slam attacks. Ruvox also comes bundled with 5 whole Incarnon evolution perks, with 3 options for each, meaning there are definitely multiple ways to build this weapon, but here's what I did. After trying both a heavy slam build and a melee influence setup, I decided to pull a Satoru Gojo and put them together. Building for huge slams combined with melee influence and gas damage turns these fists into a crowd destroyer, letting you build combo off of shockwave synergy and immediately awaken your Incarnon form with swift transmute. In the Incarnon state, vulnerability serum causes every enemy impaled by your spikes to be 35% more vulnerable to status effects, meaning that you're almost guaranteed to immediately proc melee influence and just cover every nearby enemy with gas procs. If you're lucky, the innate blast damage from slam attacks will also propagate through the crowd, just in case things weren't dying fast enough. Overall, an incredible weapon, which can serve as either a quick crowd deleter option or a full focus of your loadout if you can stomach slam spamming. Close enough. Welcome back, Cavalier DMC5. The Coda Motovore is one of the new Coda-infested weapons released with the Tekrot Encore that helped free us from the tragic weapon drought of 1999. Coda weapons can be purchased from Eleanor for 10 live heart cells, which can be earned by vanquishing a Technocyte Coda. The Motovore has a unique passive where not only does the weapon change appearance based on what physical damage type you mod the weapon for, but it also gains 6 times the normal physical damage from mods, with the form the wheel takes giving an extra stat buff. Impact increases attack speed, puncture increases range, and slash increases status chance. Now, I know slash is good, and everyone is gonna mod this thing for slash. So, in the interest of being different, I decided to go for puncture damage to take advantage of melee Dowdy to get some insane range and downright disrespectful crit numbers. I gotta be honest, this weapon made me a believer in puncture damage. It's innately good against armor, and the status proc increases your crit chance even more. Perfect to pair with modding for cold damage, so long as you're trying not to fit in. Also, I would use Augur Strike instead of Jugulus Barbs, but surprise surprise, up until this point, in my 10-year Warframe career, I've had absolutely no reason to put puncture mods on my melee weapons. Hell, I didn't even know this mod existed until I searched puncture damage on the wiki. As for progenitor elements, I'd recommend either radiation or magnetic, just something to help increase condition overload damage without messing up your elemental modding in any way. From its design to its unique passive, you can tell the Coda Motovore had a lot of love put into it from the dev team, and I think the fact that it's also insanely good makes it a must-have for pretty much everyone, really. Nah, because what do you mean one of the oldest, ugliest weapons in the game gets an Incarnon, Amalgam Mod, 6 cars, and a private jet? The Furax are a pair of Grineer fist weapons whose blueprint can be bought at the market. The Furax Wraith, however, is its edgy cousin that's slightly better in every way. The easiest way to get the Furax Wraith is to have earned it during Operation Rathum 9 years ago. Man. So unless you have a time machine, you'll have to farm the parts individually with Cetus bounties, or get it all through the Dog Days event. Incarnon-wise, Furax really doesn't have any super unique properties besides heavy slam attacks creating a patch of damaging fire, but I found a more interesting build. Melee Influence. Okay, wait, hold on, hear me out. Okay, please. I know Influence is the current de facto brain-dead build to put on literally every melee weapon right now, but Furax can do it in an interesting and unique way. You see, Amalgam Furax Body Count is a unique mod dropped by the Ropalolist. And in addition to the standard body count effect and increased pistol fire rate, kills with the Furax will now cause radial 15-meter bursts that apply a wildly inconsistent amount of blast and impact procs. This, combined with Melee Influence doing what Melee Influence do, adding blast stacks to your pre-existing procs, making everything go pop faster, which in turn creates more bursts, which might also benefit from Influence. And look, all I have to go off here is vibes, and the vibes of this setup are immaculate. This is all also helped by the fact that the Furax is a fist weapon, and as such has quick animations that feel satisfying to use. I mean, could you imagine having an entire weapon type that's just made inoperable due to a bad stance? Boy, that would be crazy, right? Overall, I was pleasantly surprised by the Furax Wraith. It's gotten a lot of love and special attention over the years that have given it several powerful setups that I'll be happy to try out once Digital Extremes rips this Blast Influence build from my cold, dead hands. Oh my god, how many years has it been since our last new Tonfa weapon? The Tonkatt is a Grineer weapon, and like I believe all Grineer weapons should, this thing functions like orc tech. You see, the Tonkatt are a perfectly average pair of Tonfas with one strange gimmick. Building the combo multiplier overheats the Tonkatts, setting enemies ablaze. Now, if you lacked reading comprehension, like me, you might have assumed, oh, so it's like a scaling increase in heat damage with your combo multiplier. Wrong! This weapon gains a stacking buff that gives 4% heat damage on combo increase. So that's like, hit a couple enemies, go from 1 combo to 2x combo, boom, that's 4% heat damage. This buff lasts 15 seconds, is refreshed by subsequent stacks, and loses all stacks when it runs out. So like, don't let that happen. Don't worry though, it gets even more jank. You see, the buff stacks up to 30 times, and getting to max combo will only give you 11 stacks. So this weapon actively encourages you to regularly just dump your entire combo multiplier to keep that heat damage increase. Now, your reaction to this might be, what the heck, that's stupid, why would I do that? To which I reply, 120% bonus heat damage that doesn't combine with other elements. That's right, I know you influence users are absolutely drooling at the idea of stacking heat and gas procs, but in an act of symbolic protest, I've decided to take my build in another direction. Taking advantage of Tonkatt's incredibly balanced stats, like literally the crit and status are the same, I decided to make a hybrid build that applies 4 different elemental status effects. Furthermore, I reached to the absolute back of the mod shelf and pulled out a heavy attack efficiency mod, so I could dump some of my full combo to keep increasing it without losing out on my scaling mods completely. You can either use Focus Radon or Focus Energy for this, depending on your orientation. The results? I mean, seems pretty good. Free heat damage on a weapon is nothing to sneeze at, even if you have to jump through a couple extra hoops and dedicate a little bit more brain power to maintaining your buff up time. I also, again, really appreciate the idea that Grineer weapons are just hack jobs put together from scavenged materials and items that work in powerful but backwards and esoteric ways. It's an interesting theme for a faction, and I hope to see more of that theme in future weapons. So basically, that's why I think just a little smooch between bros doesn't mean that I'm... Not my name. Hi, Digital Extremes, what do you got there? Whoa, that's sick! I mean, it's one of the weapon types with the most unrealized potential to... Is that really all we can think to do with swords and shields? I just think... Oh my god, did you see that? Well. If it isn't the second Grineer melee weapon made out of reclaimed scrap in just as many weeks. I gotta be honest, I really liked the Tonkatt, but the tack and lug, I mean, they're good, make no mistake. It's just... You know, the Tonkatt blew my mind with a unique and interesting mechanic, and the Hawk and 2 is kind of just a remix of stuff we've seen before. Innate blast damage and a projectile heavy attack. It's also kind of dampened by the fact that basically all of the high-level builds you're gonna see with this thing involve melee influence. In a mix-up for influence weapons, however, you get to choose a purely heavy attack spam build to make the most out of your flying disc attack, giving you a 3rd projectile weapon in a game where your loadout already ensures you have 2, or a more balanced approach with a Tenokai build. This lets you use the pretty decent light attack combos of the sword and shield stance, while occasionally throwing out a tactical nuke when the RNG gods deem it time to cause havoc. But yeah, I am genuinely surprised that so many sword and shield weapons gimmicks are just throwing the shield or some other projectile. I guess it kind of loops around to swords and shields being a bit of an odd weapon type in a fast-paced ninja game. I would also like to finally get another sword and shield weapon that has an actual, you know, sword. Overall, the tack and lug are a great weapon mechanically. I just find them personally to be a bit boring, and hope that the next sword and shield weapon we get has a more unique mechanic. Ah yes, the Thalys. Added in the Ileweaver update, this weapon is an Incarnon heavy scythe bought from— oh no, he's gone. Bought from Acrithis in exchange for Scuttler husks gained from playing new Ileweaver game mode. Build-wise, you're gonna have to go melee influence. I know, I'm so sorry. Every melee weapon I cover is the same build, but it's special on this weapon, I swear. What really makes the Thalys unique is its Incarnon effect. Probably the most complex melee Incarnon yet. Building up enough combo form swaps the Thalys and allows it to start planting void shards. These tiny growths are applied on hit once per enemy and last 15 seconds. Each time you apply a new shard, all pre-existing shards damage their host for 75% of the applying strike's damage. This creates a gameplay loop where you want to maximize the damage of your first strike against new enemies. There's a lot of ways to do this, but the most straightforward and familiar is through melee influence. See? I told you it was special on this build. The Incarnon upgrades are pretty straightforward. Dreadful Reach gives a metric butt ton of range, Echoes of Rage builds your combo for free, and Swift Transmute lets you activate the weapon's gimmick faster. Where this weapon gets some serious sauce though is with Upgrade 5, with 3 options that all change how your shards function. Explosive Growth makes planting new shards grow existing ones, and when your shards grow 3 times, they explode and instantly impale enemies. Chain Shatter lets you detonate shards with heavy attacks and lets shard explosions chain react. Lastly, Void Splinters is the most unique, reducing shard damage in exchange for a longer duration and turning shards into weak spots with a 100% bonus crit chance. I personally find it super finicky as the shards are always gray, small, and can appear in random places on the enemy, but 100% crit chance is just the kind of compelling buff that I can see motivating some legends to make it work on their build. Overall, I'd say that Thalys is a perfectly serviceable modern Warframe melee. Equal parts crit and status to allow for the same hybrid builds we've been making for the past 2 years, combined with one actually pretty cool gimmick that changes the way you play with the weapon. But like, seriously, when are we getting another heavy scythe stance? Gale Force Dawn makes me want to rip my hair out.